Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic night. I hope that you and your family and your friends are safe, and if not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening today. A lot of it's rather upsetting, I should say the least, as we get towards the end of Ukraine. I'll give another disclaimer there as we get into one of these topics, but there's generally not a lot of good news when it comes to what's happening, and luckily we're able to help on this channel because you guys have made this an awesome community. And we're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never doing merchandising or anything like that. What we're 100% doing is everything we do goes to fundraising and humanitarian aid efforts and, and development efforts and everything like that across the globe. So please be sure to check out the video description below and check out all the different organizations that we have there. Because all of these are listed, or all of these we have listed also on our Discord and on our website. But please check them out. It's all in the description. You guys can go and check out a bunch of amazing organizations, and not just for Ukraine, but for all places around the world. We want to be able to give back to the very news stories that we talk about every single day. You guys are the only ones that actually make this possible, and I can't appreciate your. I can't understate your guys' efforts. You guys have been awesome in supporting us in this endeavor. We want to get to the point where we're actually large enough to put fundraisers directly onto the stream. And so I hope that you guys are able to continue to help us and support us in doing that. All of these organizations have been vetted by us. I highly encourage you guys go check them out, and you can vet them yourselves as well. 80% or more of all of the donations that the organizations in the description receive actually go to the programs and actually helping people, with less than 20% actually going and going to salaries and administration's costs and fundraising costs. So I appreciate your guys' support. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, then please give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us. The more people that come here, obviously, the more people can enjoy the news. But most importantly, the more people that are here and enjoy this channel, the more people can support these efforts that are going on globally to help people. And with that, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive right into the news. And we jump over here, and we're immediately going to actually jump into the Donbass. We're kind of going to go a little bit out of order here today because we have a lot to discuss on the last topic. But the first thing we jump into is here in Slavyansk, where those precursor bombardments are continuing. Slavyansk and Kramatorsk are expected to be the next major segments of the battlefield, along with Bakhmut. These areas are getting precursor bombardments, meaning these are bombardments leading up to Russian forces actually advancing with their mechanized and motorized forces into these locations. Slavyansk is on the way to Kramatorsk. If they want to take Kramatorsk, they have to go through Slavyansk. And Slavyansk continues to receive an immense amount of shelling. This is coming from Vladimir Lach, who is the head of the Slavyansk City Military Administration. He has stated, quote, rocket attacks on the city of Slavyansk in the Donetsk region on July the 14th. 2 people were injured and local residential buildings were damaged. As we move over here into the rest of the Donbass, we can see here, this is the Ukrainian village of Kamyshuvaka, which is within the Luhansk region. But as Ukrainian forces were pulling out of here, they weren't just running with their tail tucked between their legs. They were actually conducting a fighting withdrawal out of these, a tactical fighting withdrawal out of this region. And behind them, all of these Russian forces that were trying to, destroy them, close with and destroy them, got obliterated. So if you take a look here, these are just a crap ton of Russian vehicles utterly destroyed as they were trying to follow these retreating Ukrainian troops, not expecting them to actually be fighting back as they were conducting a fighting withdrawal out of the Luhansk region. So just take a look. It's just a vehicle graveyard. And no audio with this footage. But look at this. This is just complete and total destruction of Russian forces here. So We do know that they were doing a fighting withdrawal, and these scenes were playing out all across the Luhansk region as the Ukrainian forces withdrew out of that pocket in order to prevent themselves from becoming encircled, cut off, and then effectively destroyed by Russian forces. As we move over here into Chasiv Yar, we have our final update regarding this story, it would seem, today. The rescue and recovery efforts have finished at Chasiv Yar. This comes after several days ago, a 5-story apartment complex was hit and completely collapsed by a Russian missile strike, which in the end, the total dead thus far is 48 people. So today, the Ukrainian authorities effectively concluded the search. And we can see them, or we can see the Ukrainian rescue efforts ongoing here at the very end. So, but today is the last day that search has been completed. They have concluded those efforts. As you jump over here into Donetsk, something that we've seen throughout the duration of the war, and something that's good to really put an emphasis on, is really the inadequacy of Russian vehicles. And right here we can see them putting homemade armor onto these vehicles. So just take a look at this. So why are they doing this? Well, the reason they're putting on this homemade armor is very simple. The vehicle armor that they currently have on these, especially their lighter vehicles, their BMDs, BMP series vehicles, their BTRs, their logistical trucks, which have no armor on them, is really inadequate. And they're not really even capable of really deflecting, even light anti-armor weaponry, which of course is designed to destroy this stuff, but it's, it could be a lot better, right? And I think that could go to say with a lot of lightly armored vehicles, but the Russians have run into significant anti-tank capacity on the Ukrainian side, and they are just getting their vehicles destroyed left and right, especially catastrophic kills, which seem to be the vast majority of what we see on the battlefield. While earlier on the war, as logistical breakdown really crippled the Russian forces in the north, we saw a lot of abandoned vehicles and a lot of lightly damaged vehicles. But as the war in the Donbass has continued, we're seeing a lot more, just catastrophic destruction, which, they're catastrophic kills, meaning that these things are completely destroyed. They're unusable. And we just continue to see that, over and over again. It's been a lot less captured and slightly damaged vehicles, that could be repaired and put back into service on the Ukrainian forces side. Which goes to show that this is just, at this point, the Russians have some kind of logistical network. We do know that they have some kind of logistical network in place, but they just don't have the armor or the troops to really, effectively put these, anti-armor weapons out of action. They just simply can't. There's too many of them. They're too widespread. And a lot of this is called into question the obsolescence of the tank and the armored vehicles. I don't think so, personally. The tank in an armored vehicle is a tool. Just like every other weapon, it's a tool. It has a specific purpose, a specific job. It's good for specific situations. The drawback is that the Russians saw the capacity of armored warfare. They really, toyed with it during World War II. And they tried to develop it further after that during the Cold War. We're seeing Cold War tactics. This isn't 21st century tactics whatsoever. This is the Soviet doctrine, what we see now. And they don't have any light infantry units. They don't have that kind of a warfare mentality. Everything is mechanized or motorized. It's supposed to be fast-paced, heavily armored, heavy-hitting maneuver warfare. And we can see that really has become more of a hindrance and a detriment to their efforts than it has anything else. And unfortunately, the Donetsk Oblast is receiving additional shelling here. According to Pavlo Krylenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, the Donetsk Oblast has received more shelling. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on July the 13th. 3 people were killed and 5 citizens were injured. Mariupol has a couple of different developments today, and we can see where the first thing is partisan activity. Partisan activity is actually taking place here in Mariupol, and they have actually set fire to the satellite plant in order to prevent continued pillaging and theft by the Russian forces. Let me take a look here. So quite, not anything major. Obviously, they don't have a lot of weapons. I mean, Mariupol is totally destroyed. They don't have a lot of resources to work with. But whatever resources you do have, there definitely seems to be some kind of resistance ongoing there. But the pillaging continues nonetheless, as 3 ships full of rolled steel have left for Rostov. 4 arrived with assumed military cargo when they got into port. And these are now leaving and heading towards Russia. All this steel was pillaged out of Mariupol, and we will continue to probably see that for the continuation of the conflict unless Mariupol is retaken. Pillaging is pretty widespread. We see this when we look at the north and the conflict in the north, as those areas are no longer under occupation. We can really see what the Russian forces were doing early on in the war. Down here, Mariupol being such a major steel producer, being the largest, the Azovstal being one of the largest steel factories in Europe, along with the other steel mills and facilities all around the city. These places produce a massive amount of materials, and that stuff isn't readily available for Russia. They haven't mobilized their industry and their economy for a war, at least not a prolonged conflict, and we can see the ramifications of that as they're having to pull older and older stockpiles into service. They weren't expecting the war to last this long, is long story short, and they don't have the resources. They didn't mobilize their entire nation. They're calling this a special military operation, and a general mobilization would mean that they would be declaring this a war, which would go against all rhetoric that they have had up to this point. So we will likely just see that very same steel that was pillaged immediately being reappropriated to building new tanks and new vehicles and new equipment for the Russian military to come up for some of their shortcomings that they've had so far in their economy and industry. And here's the near-death experience. This is from a member of the Azov Regiment that is located here. We know that the Azov Regiment is supporting efforts down here in the southern part of the fighting. And he shared his near-death experience after a 152 millimeter shell landed right in between 2 trenches, but it failed to detonate. You can go ahead and take a look at this. So, pretty immense, to say the least. And that would be, I would be shaking in my boots, to put it lightly when it comes to this. That's definitely not, that makes you pucker up a little bit. I've never had artillery land this close. I've had it land, decently close, but never that close. That's a, oof. No thanks. Another large explosion has been seen here in Kherson. We know that this is likely another Russian logistical center that has been hit by Ukrainian forces via artillery, which we do know is within range of Kherson. We do know that they did destroy, as according to the Department of Strategic Communications for the Armed Forces of Ukraine, stated, quote, the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian ammunition depot near the city of Kherson on July the 14th. And we do have a picture for what appears to be a blast just outside the city. But reprisals continue. Russia actually pounded Mykolaiv today with missiles, or starting about 5 a.m. this morning. While no deaths have been reported, the damage is rather significant. One person was injured, however. The damage includes a direct hit on a local school as well as hitting a shopping mall. You can go ahead and take a look here. So this is that school. It took a direct hit from a Russian missile strike. But we also have more information regarding the strikes. Here's another section of damage from the strikes today. Well, we're gonna have to open this one actually inside of Telegram here. Go ahead and take a look. So unfortunately, quite a bit of destruction today. And as we exit out of that covers all of Mykolaiv. Once again, one person was reportedly injured. There was some rather extensive amount of damage. 18 buses, a shopping mall, and as well as the school, which took a direct hit. But really, what today is about when it comes to Ukraine is VINNYTSYA. VINNYTSYA has not been hit throughout the entire duration of the war. And as we're getting ready to get into this, I also want to put a disclaimer on this, as VINNYTSYA is there's some more graphic images than we normally would go through on that are getting ready to come up. So I please express that some viewer discretion is advised here. You may find some of this disturbing or very hard to look at. But I think it's important for us to see and understand this, and we'll get into this a little bit further. But VINNYTSYA was a massacre today. VINNYTSYA, for those that don't know, VINNYTSYA hasn't really been struck at all during this war. VINNYTSYA is the capital of the VINNYTSYA Oblast. It really has been relatively peaceful. There hasn't been a lot of damage that has happened within this oblast. It's really deep inside the interior of Ukraine. It's far from any action that's occurred. You know, they weren't really they didn't really they haven't really seen any damage, to the point that internally displaced people inside of Ukraine have fled to VINNYTSYA. People have fled to VINNYTSYA from other locations throughout Ukraine because it's so relatively safe there. Much like Lviv, but even Lviv has had missile strikes before. This is really a first for VINNYTSYA. A lot of refugees, a lot of humanitarian efforts ongoing in this region. And the Russians hit it with a missile today. The missile actually ended up, so far we know, that has killed about 20 people. with 52 being known as being injured. 117 have requested medical assistance up until this point, as so far as we have been able to report and record, and it's a pretty extensive amount of damage. Once again, one of the individuals that was killed is a young girl with Down syndrome. She actually starred in a advertisement that was led. It was for an initiative led by Mrs. Zelensky, Zelenska, who is President Zelensky's wife and the First Lady of Ukraine. She was very well known. 3 children have been killed in this blast alone. 4 additional have been injured. But this is beyond frustrating. So this is coming from the initial responses to the blast. This right here, this building is a hospital. This is a research hospital here that was operating at the time of the blast. And the damage is immense. It is absolutely immense. We have a lot of stuff coming out of here. This is brutal. This is a child. Specifically, this is Lisa. And there's that picture that you may recognize from the thumbnail. This was also taken during the immediate aftermath. And take a look here at some of these photos. So this is a hospital right here. This is some of the efforts firefighting. As they're trying to clean up and trying to put out these fires. Those are search dogs that are being brought into this. Memorials have already started to pop up, especially due to the loss of life, especially amongst children. And the Russians, their response to this is especially damning. So these are messages pulled off of different Telegram Russian channels regarding this, and they have been translated for us. This is in response to the image of Lisa, a young girl with Down syndrome who was killed in this blast. And in the response to these images, kill them all. Oh, how wonderful. I'll open a bottle of champagne for 8 dead bodies in VINNYTSYA. There are no civilians, and if there are, then they are all fascism supporters. Such attacks should be happening every hour. Fuck you. That's our revenge for Nova Kakova. Glory to Putin. Burn in hell for all the children of Donbass. And regarding Lisa and her mother is in critical condition. She lost at least a leg, which is actually in some of those photos. Her leg was completely amputated during the blast. And she is in critical condition. Lisa has been killed. It's very gruesome, unblurred. I will not show any of this unblurred. It's already gruesome more than I usually would, but this is important to understand. And this is a post by Lisa's mother less than 30 minutes before the attack occurred. less than 30 minutes before the attack today. This really shook us as a team. And it shook us for many reasons. The rhetoric from the average Russian is one thing that definitely shook us. And there's not a lot. I spent time in Syria, in Iraq, and I saw a lot of things, a lot of pretty screwed up things. This brings back really bad memories to begin with. But this is absolutely terrible. The loss of life isn't as much as Kremenchuk or even Chasiv Yar, right? But think of these images, and this is what has happened, especially for children. This has happened hundreds of times throughout this war, many of which have gone undocumented in photo, or at least those photos haven't been released. This has happened in Mariupol countless times inside the city of Mariupol alone. Melitopol, Enerhodar, Novokakhovka, Kherson, Severodonetsk, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Donetsk, Bakhmut, any of the nameless villages that have been completely wiped off the face of the earth. Kyiv, Irpin, Hostomel, Bucha, Kremenchuk, Zaporizhia yesterday, Dnipro, Kharkiv, Sumy, Chernihiv, all over the country. Over 650 Ukrainian children have been killed as a result of the war since February 24th. This is also a war crime for several reasons. And I have talked about this before, and I have brought up the Geneva Convention a lot, and I've even brought up articles, but today I want to do it in a much more in-depth way, so that way we can fully understand why this is a war crime in so many levels. So these are all articles of the Geneva Convention, specifically the 1948 Geneva Convention and the 4th Geneva Convention under Protocol 1. I only went through just Protocol 1 of the Geneva Convention. I didn't go through the original articles, the 4th Geneva Convention articles. I didn't go through the 2nd Protocol or the 3rd Protocol, mostly because there wasn't incendiary munitions, which is what the 3rd Protocol covers. I didn't go through customary international humanitarian law. I just went through Protocol 1 of the Geneva Convention. That is it. That's all I did. Just one simple, and I didn't even go through all of it. There came a point where it was just enough. I figured you would get the point. So, this is all from Protocol 1 of the 1948 Geneva Conventions, accepted in 1970. This is from Part 2, Section 1, Article 12. Protection of medical units. A medical unit shall be protected at all times and shall not be the object of attack. Paragraph 1 shall apply to civilian medical units provided that they belong to one of the parties of the conflict and are recognized and authorized by a competent authority of one of the parties of the conflict, or are authorized in conformity with Article 9, Paragraph 2 of the Protocol or Article 27 of the First Convention. We have this actually geolocated where the strike took place. But you look at that, a medical center. We can continue. Article 15 of the same section. Civilian medical personnel shall be respected and protected. If needed, all available help shall be afforded to civilian medical personnel in an area where civilian medical services are disrupted by reason of combat activity. Article 20, regarding reprisals. Considering someone stated that this is revenge for Novokakhovka. Reprisals against the persons and objects protected by this part are prohibited. This is the protection of civilians and medical personnel. Part 4, Section 1, Article 48. In order to ensure respect for and the protection of civilian population and civilian objects, the parties to the conflict shall at all times distinguish between civilian population and combatants and between civilian objects and military objectives, and accordingly shall direct their operations only against military objectives. Article 51. The protection of the civilian population. The civilian population and individual civilians shall enjoy general protection against dangers arising from military operations. To give effect to this protection, the following rules, which are in addition to applicable rules of international law, shall be observed in all circumstances. The civilian population as such, as well as individual civilians, shall not be the object of attack. Acts or threats of violence, the primary purpose of which is to spread terror among civilian population, are prohibited. Civilians shall enjoy the protection afforded by this section unless and or for such time they take direct part in hostilities. Indiscriminate attacks are prohibited. Indiscriminate attacks are those which are not directed at a specific military objective, or those which employ a method or means of combat but which they cannot be directed at a specific military objective, or those which employ a method or means of combat that the effects of which cannot be limited as required by this protocol, and subsequently in each such case are of a nature to strike military objectives and civilians or civilian objects without distinction. Among others, the following types of attacks are to be considered as indiscriminate: an attack by bombardment by any means or means which treats as a single military objective a number of clearly separated and distinct military objectives located in a city, town, village, or other area containing similar concentration of civilians or civilian objects, and an attack which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, or a combination thereof, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. Attacks against the civilian population or civilians by the way of reprisals are prohibited. The presence or movements of the civilian population or individual civilians shall not be used to render certain points or areas immune from military operations, in particular in an attempt to shield military objectives from attacks or to shield, favor, or impede military operations. The parties to the conflict shall not direct the movement of the civilian population or individual civilians in order to attempt to shield military objectives from attacks or to shield military operations. Any violation of these prohibitions shall not release the parties to the conflict from their legal obligations to respect the civilian population and civilians, include the obligations taken under the precautionary measures provided in Article 57. Article 57. Precautions in attack. In the conduct of military operations, constant care shall be taken to spare the civilian population, civilians, and civilian objects. With respect to attacks, the following precautions shall be taken. Those who plan or decide upon an attack shall do everything feasible to verify that the objectives to be attacked are neither civilians nor the civilian objects and are not subject to the special protections but are military objectives within the meanings of paragraph 2, Article 52 that are not prohibited by the provisions of the protocol to attack them. All feasible precautions in the choice of means and methods of attack with a view to avoiding, in any event to minimizing, incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, and damage to civilian objects. Refrain from deciding to launch any attack which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, a combination thereof, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. An attack shall be canceled or suspended if it becomes apparent that the objective is not a military one or is subject to special protection, or that the attack may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, or a combination thereof, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. Effective advance warning shall be given of attacks which may affect the civilian population unless the circumstances do not permit. When a choice is possible between several military objectives for obtaining a similar military advantage, the objective to be selected shall be that the attack on which may be expected to cause the least danger to civilian lives and to civilian objects. In the conduct of military operations at sea or in the air, each party to the conflict, in conformity with the rights and duties under the rules of international law applicable in armed conflict, take all reasonable precautions to avoid losses to civilian lives and damage to civilian objects. No provision of this article may be construed as authorizing any attacks against the civilian population, civilians, or civilian objects. Article 58. The parties to a conflict shall, to the maximum extent feasible, without prejudice to Article 49 of the Fourth Convention, endeavor to remove the civilian population, individual civilians, and civilian objects under their control from the vicinity of military objectives, avoid locating military objectives within or near densely populated areas, and take necessary precautions to protect the civilian population, individual civilians, and civilian objects under the control against the dangers resulting from military operations. As if you cannot tell, this is frustrating. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 reasons. And that's not even counting. I didn't even go through all of Protocol 1. It's not counting the actual Geneva Conventions, all 4 of them. That's not counting the other 2 protocols, or even counting this protocol in its entirety. That is 8 instances in which this is a war crime. When I call something a war crime on this channel, I am not calling it a war crime to just say that word, as is commonly done. Many people don't understand the Geneva Conventions or international customary humanitarian law, and the term war crime gets thrown around. Civilian casualties and collateral damage happen. It's a war. That is the unfortunate and tragic result of a war. This is not a tragedy. This was not a military target. This was an attack in the center of a city known to have an extensively large population of internally displaced people. It's a large civilian concentration area in which no forethought or planning was put into this to prevent civilian casualties. There was no military objective. There was no significant concrete military advantage of doing this. If this was a reprisal for destruction of Novokhovka, as some people are claiming on, of course, their, whatever, on their telegrams, that this was a reprisal for the destruction of so many major ammunition depots, or an act of terror to terrorize the civilian population, each of those are war crime. The fact that this is a hospital makes this a war crime. The fact that this is a civilian population with no clear military objective is a war crime. The fact that this is targeting a monument in honor of the Air Forces of Ukraine, that is destruction of a culturally significant monument and culturally significant item of the country of Ukraine by an aggressive force, that is a war crime. And this is happening all over Ukraine every single day. It's just this time we happen to get to see what is actually happening. We get to see dead children. We get to see the death of civilian people with no clear, distinctive military advantage. With no point. There is no point to this. This did nothing for the Russian forces. Nothing. They didn't destroy an ammunition depot. They didn't hit a military target. They didn't anything. As we have studied Russian channels and chatter, we have noticed that it takes roughly about 12 to 24 hours for the Russian forces or the Russian Federation to respond to this kind of event. Let me take a look at Kremenchuk, to the situations in Mariupol and Severodonetsk. Let me take a look at what happens in Kyiv. You can see it takes roughly 12 to 24 hours for the Russians to put together a response to somehow justify what has happened. This happened at about 10 a.m. local time. We are quickly moving into the morning in this part of the world, and we are not seeing anything about this. We see nothing. We hear nothing. Nothing. It is quiet. Ervis Chang asked, "Pardon my ignorance, but has there been a war or invasion that followed these rules?" So there is a distinct difference in what is happening here. The importance of what is happening here is not the incident in and of itself. The incident in and of itself, you could declare a tragedy if it were a one-time occurrence. The magnitude of what we see here, and unfortunately here in VINNYTSYA, it's not a one-time event. A war crime is defined as violating the Geneva Conventions and customary international humanitarian law, usually with the effect of killing civilians or people who are hordes to combat, meaning they are no longer capable of operating in a military capacity or are a threat to you, such as those wounded, mentally incapacitated, unconscious, or who have surrendered. That is usually what occurs, and that is usually what a war crime is defined as. And that's usually what it consists of. War crimes usually occur because of frustrations. You see things like the Haditha massacre, in which I have actually written an article. It's on our website if you want to go check it out. I wrote about the Haditha massacre. And the Haditha massacre occurred because someone in that U.S. Marine squad was killed in action. And on a rampage, they went and they killed civilians over the course of about 3 days throughout the Iraqi city of Haditha. That's a war crime. That happened. It's well documented that it happened. War crimes constitute in and of themselves usually are based off of individual troops or small groups of individual soldiers or those in uniform, who are participating in actions that violate the customary international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions and their protocols. These are individual acts undertaken by individual people. I have never once said Ukrainian troops have never committed war crimes. Never. I will never claim as such. They most certainly have. But there's a next level to that. I have discussed that before. The next level to this kind of event is crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity include genocide and ethnic cleansing. what we see across Ukraine is a crime against humanity. This is purposefully done and perpetrated by a government. This is a government doing this. Kharkiv has no strategic or tactical importance. It's too late for that now. And since they can't hit it with their own artillery pieces, they hit it with long-range Iskander-M ballistic missiles fired from Belgorod. That does nothing for the Russian advantage. What it does do is it terrorizes the people of Kharkiv. Striking Kyiv has no military advantage. Taking Kyiv, the option to take Kyiv is long gone. Striking apartment complexes does nothing. Mykolaiv, striking schools in Mykolaiv does nothing. There is no advantage. There is no crucial, concrete military target. Can it be a war crime if the people are on your land? Yes. It doesn't matter who conducts a war crime. It doesn't matter. Either any party involved can commit a war crime. In fact, Blackwater wasn't even officially a military group. They are a private military corporation. Once again, committed war crimes. Guess what? Blackwater doesn't exist anymore. There comes a point in a war in which something is a tragedy. There comes a point in which you chalk it up as a reason why war is not fought in the 21st century. World War I, before these protections existed against the civilian population, was a tragedy. This is why modern warfare isn't fought in Europe. It's not particularly anything different from what had happened over the last couple hundred years. It was just an exceptionally bloody example. That's why it was the Great War, the war to end all wars. 20 years later, World War II occurred. And what did we see? We saw something so terrible done by Nazi Germany under the Nazi regimes that a new word had to be created. That new word was the term genocide. It was coined in order to describe the absolute horrors in which the Holocaust had experienced. This isn't the first or the last. Definitely not. But it is a particularly bloody example of what happens when a powerful nation, such as Russia, decides that it needs more room. We can look at examples of history. The German invasion of Czechoslovakia. Their justifications for it. The taking of Austria. The invasion of Poland. Each time Adolf Hitler decided to invade a country at the beginning of World War II and declare war, his justifications were amongst the usual same light. Persecution of German-speaking peoples, egregious offenses of the government persecuting their own people, and a lack of effort on the international community's part to stop this government persecution of their own people. That same rhetoric is repeated today, only in a different language. That is the unfortunate reality. The unfortunate reality is that VINNYTSYA, VINNYTSYA is just one example. It's just an exceptionally bloody one of why this isn't just a war. We have a bias for Ukraine on this channel for many reasons. And it's not because I'm Western. It's not just because I live in an area where that kind of rhetoric is tossed around. It's because every single day, you as viewers only see 10 to 25% of whatever we find. You only see 10 to 25% of what we as members of the team actually go through and comb through. Many of this is distressing. It's demoralizing to witness, even in photographs, let alone I couldn't imagine in person. And I have seen some very, very terrible things done in person. What has happened in Ukraine is beyond words. The responses from the Russians, who we also follow, and we can translate because we have our own in-house translator to verify and vet all of what is being said by the Russians. That only proves, between the evidence that we see with our very own eyes and their rhetoric, that this war is more than a war. It's the ethnic cleansing at the very least, and I would go and dare say, as a small-time YouTuber, that this is more of a genocide done very poorly. The evidence shows this. This evidence shows state-sponsored terrorism. I wish I had a script because it would have been easier for me to actually probably put these thoughts down in a coherent fashion. But unfortunately, I do this live. The fact of the reality is that VINNYTSYA, the pictures of dead children, such as this one, happen every single day across Ukraine. Child casualties mount. As the Russians said, this is for the children of the Donbass. The Russian war on Ukraine has killed over 600 children, almost 650 children in this war, many of which aren't documented in photographs, just as poor Lisa is here. But it happens nonetheless. They die in no less of a horrific and terrible fashion. There are laws in place so that this thing doesn't happen widespread. The 1948 conventions of the Geneva Convention is also known as something else, along with all of its protocols, which were adopted between 1970 and 1980. They are known as the Genocide Conventions, in order to prevent such a terrible thing as the Holocaust and genocide from ever occurring again. That is the situation. I am angered by it. I'm demoralized by it. I am upset by it. As many others are. It's the reality of modern warfare and why it shouldn't be fought. I thought when I left the Marine Corps that I would be done seeing things like this. When the war started, my first thoughts weren't of the Ukrainian people, but were to would I be called back into active service. How selfish was that? Max Crew asked regarding this, Paul, just out of curiosity, if your commanding officer tells you to kill civilians while you were in the Marines, you have the ability to disobey order without receiving punishment for it? Yes. In fact, that is a very long-standing rule. In the United States military, at least, and as well as many other NATO countries, You cannot commit a crime against humanity. You cannot commit a war crime, even if ordered. It is not a lawful order. The only orders you are required to follow in the military are lawful ones. Breaking the Geneva Convention would be unlawful. Breaking the Geneva Convention would be immoral. There have been times where I've had to question if I was going to do something. There was a personal incident that I can recall in Syria with a child in question. It was a rather warm day considering the time it was, and a child ran towards our post with breakneck speed. Unfortunately, the Islamic State had used children and the disabled in order to strap IEDs to them. They would tell them to run towards posts, and they passed the line in which we were to start using our escalations, our force escalations. And this little girl started running, and we sighted in on her and tried telling her in Kurdish and Arabic to stop. She didn't listen. Could she hear us? I don't know. We get ready to prop the flares, but she's already well within range, and we have to make a decision. And the fact is that decision was that we wouldn't shoot her. She got to the fence line in front of the post, and she waved in her nice big fuzzy jacket, abnormal for the type of weather that it was. And she waved and she said hi and ran off. That's something difficult to live with. To have to question if you're going to do that, if you're capable of doing that. And I'm glad that I didn't have to. Because luckily for me, the war was winding down. I don't talk about personal stories and experiences like this. I simply say, I have some personal experience. But I look at this photo. And I look at the photos that we see every single day on this channel. And it's very hard to understand how we as human beings can do this to one another. And in such an immense number, over such an extended period of time. This war has gone on for over 5 months. The amount of civilian casualties is almost unprecedented. In its scope and size, for the 21st century even. 22,000 people in Mariupol alone, and that's conservative estimates on the Ukrainians' part. Conservative estimates by the UN only put several thousand dead, but they expect it to be much, much higher once they discover the occupied areas. There is no amount of evidence or rhetoric that can be said by the Russians about a military target on any front that can justify these types of actions. That is why I'm pro-Ukrainian. That's why I have no problem having the slogan Slava Ukraini being posted on my own bios and everything else. I may be a cynical individual, and I may be an individual who doesn't know a whole lot about what he's talking about. I wasn't high-ranking in any way, shape, or form when I was in the military. I did 2 tours in the Middle East, saw very minimal action, if anything. Had some very minimal experiences. The war was over. It wasn't 2003 again. Those guys had it rough. The guys in Afghanistan had it very rough. The Ukrainians have nothing on this. This is a whole different beast from what any of us may have experienced, especially my generation. But this is past a war crime now. This is past war crimes. This is a crime against humanity. And I have nothing more than to look at the body of a dead child and understand that that is in fact a crime against humanity. Because there is no way humanity was involved in the launching of that missile. I do not hate the Russian people. I do not hate anybody. I don't hate Kurds or Arabs. And I had some rather personal bad experiences. I don't hate Russians for what's happening here. You'll never see me call them rats or dogs or subhuman or orcs or anything like that. You'll never hear me call them Hajis. I feel like that's dehumanization. I don't think that's right of any of us to do. So I ask that you not do that on this channel or on our platforms. But this is why we do this every single night. Because I at least have some idea of what I'm talking about in general. I'm no expert. My only expertise lie in how armored warfare works and anti-armor warfare, considering that's my job. Some machine gunnery on the side. I'm not tactically knowledgeable, or I am to an extent, but not on large scales. I'm not strategically knowledgeable. I was never taught to be strategic. Not my problem. My problem was to, get my small objective in my small part of the world and make sure that I did my job. I never had to think about that stuff. And trying to advise on this kind of stuff and trying to explain this kind of stuff, it's very difficult. And I'm not right all of the time. And that's fine. I don't expect to be. I don't expect to be right about a lot of things. But what I am trying to do here is I'm trying to help people. I've seen the worst of humanity. And I continue to see it only get worse because I thought I'd seen the bottom level. Man, was I wrong. I have not seen the bottom of the barrel, and I don't think any of us have. But the whole point of this channel is to give back. The whole point of this channel is to do good. I appreciate you guys for joining us, every night. And I appreciate you guys for supporting the organizations. There are others that do profit and they do sell merchandising and they get big off of what's happening. I don't see the point in becoming rich off of other people's misery. I think it's a poor taste and it really isn't ethical. None of us do. So please make sure, for this very reason, because the Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement and the United 24 and all of, a brother's brother and all of the organizations that we have listed, UNICEF, they all have, they all have a lot of work to do. And it's because of stuff like this. And I really just want as much support for those organizations as physically possible. And if you have more, please go on the Discord and on our Discord. That link's in the description with everything else. And just tell a staff member. Because I want good things to happen. And I want to be a force for change with this channel. And a force of good. And it's because of stuff like this. And I don't need to know about donations or anything. I mean, it'll be cool when we get large enough, hopefully, in the future to actually put donations on the channel and fundraisers and be able to boost that money and all that kind of stuff, because that'd be really cool. And I can't wait to do that. That's really the goal I have. I really don't care about monetization past that, because I'm never monetizing the channel for any other, I'm not going to get Google AdSense or anything on this. I'm not wanting to. It's other people's misery. It's not right. And, but I just want to have more organizations. I want to cover everything in the world, not just Ukraine. But there's starving children in Somalia right now. Millions of them. They're malnourished beyond all belief. Children under 5 are especially affected. 90% of people in the Tigray region in Ethiopia require humanitarian aid just to survive, and there's an ongoing conflict there. But I don't need to know about your guys' donations. I see some guys in the chat talking about it, and I don't need to know about it. All I want to know is that this is being a force for good, and that we're trying to be a force for good, because the world really needs it. At just like a personal level, from me to you, this world really needs it. So if you do have more, once again, please send them to me on the Discord or any of the other staff members so we can get them vetted. We're vetting some right now. We want to make sure that you guys are protected while we're still doing this. So of course we had to delete some messages off of the Discord today because of solicitation. People saying that they were in Ukraine, and they very well might be. But we just want to make sure that you guys are protected. So please send them to a staff member so we can vet them before we get them onto the streams and actually like post them for you guys to donate. We want to make sure that those are actually good for you to donate to. So, but yeah, thank you guys for the support. But really, thanks for the support to the organizations. But this stuff is, it's not fun to talk about. And I had a warning, in the Discord before the stream. I'm sorry if I'm gonna kind of lose my mind tonight, because this is demoralizing. I mean, this situation, seeing these images, this is absolutely demoralizing. It's upsetting, and I just want to do good. So, but that's it for all of Ukraine for the night. That's everything inside the country of Ukraine. There is some other stuff going on throughout the world that you might find some interest in, though. So we're going to go ahead and roll into the international news, and I'm going to try and bring my composure back, to say the least. But the first thing we're going to jump up into, of course, is in Russia. And Putin signed 100 new laws into effect today. The USSR is starting to make its comeback. They tightened the law on the so-called foreign agents. Financial contributions are no longer required in order to become a foreign agent in the eyes of Russia. Any kind of contact with foreign countries is sufficient enough. So this has been widely used against independent news media who through crowdfunding their operations are operating through platforms such as YouTube. Woohoo, I'm a foreign agent in the eyes of the Russian Federation. Fantastic. Not that I ever cared, though. Defecting to the enemy's side in any armed conflict is now considered on par with treason and carries a punishment ranging from 12 to 20 years in a prison colony. That includes places like Penal Colony Number 52, also known as the Isolation Colony. And the government can make company employees work overtime as well as nights and weekends as a special economic measure. But if you want to check out any more of that, you can feel free to check out that link that we have. I will be posting this map onto our website as well as we keep them all archived for you guys. And you can go through and actually click on all this stuff and look for yourselves. But you can go and check out this article from Medusa, which is in English. But yeah, the Russian Federation was very busy today, at least Putin, in signing laws. As we jump over here into Romania, an MQ-9 Reaper drone crashed immediately following takeoff from the Romanian Air Force, the Romanian Air Force 71st Air Base. They were conducting training exercises along with NATO partners, and the drone just ended up crashing upon landing. It was getting ready to take part in those exercises. Pretty significant fire as a result of this. I don't know if it was carrying ordnance, though. You can go ahead and take a look. And so we continue. And from there, we actually jump over here into Italy, where the premier of Italy, the Prime Minister, Mario Draghi, actually announced his resignation. This is due to a split in his coalition government, who decided to basically not participate in the confidence vote for the Prime Minister. He survived he did survive the no confidence vote, but he decided to resign anyway. And this is officially coming from Reuters, who obviously are going to have an article on that. So make sure you go and check that out as well. As you jump down here into Greece, Greece is taking a very interesting stance as they won in the European court today, which it protects their right to use the term feta. They're fighting for their culture, defending feta cheese. Denmark is now banned from exporting cheese labeled as feta. And there is a Reuters article on that, so if you guys want to go check out more and get some more in-depth knowledge as to why they did this in the first place, you guys can go ahead and check that one out. Once again, you can go check out the map on the website. As we jump down here into the Middle East, we only have one thing, and that is coming out of Peshawar. Peshawar is here in kind of the northwestern part of Pakistan, right up against the border. It's kind of on the border with the tribal regions in Afghanistan, and a man ended up killing a border officer in broad daylight. The gunman hasn't been identified, but he killed border police officers right there in Peshawar, and the folks were rather calm about this whole thing. And we can just take a look. It's unbelievable. He just rolled up on this guy and just killed him. Broad daylight. Unbelievable. And by the way, that border officer didn't see him coming. This is what, pay attention. Stay off your phone. If you're going to do this kind of stuff, if you're going to be in this line of work, stay off your phone. It's just a lot safer for you. We jump over here into the Middle East, where here in Mali, several members of the JNIM, which is a branch of Al Qaeda, they actually pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. They defected over, and they pledged their allegiance to Abu Hassan al-Hashim al-Qurashi, who is the leader of the Islamic State. And they said that they explained their actions by the fact that the Al Qaeda, despite the existing control over the territory of the Sahel Desert, did not dare establish Sharia law. So they basically stated that they thought that ISIS was going to be much more worth fighting for, to continue the jihad. So they decided they were going to go fight for the caliphate instead. And that's it for all of the international news stories that we had tonight. Obviously, there was a lot of focus that happened into Ukraine. So, but that is not the last thing, because the last thing we have is a secret Van Gogh painting, a self-portrait, in fact, was discovered via X-ray underneath another Van Gogh painting, essentially. So, if we take a look here. Oh no, not an ad. Why ads? Seriously? It's gonna be a 15-second ad? Oh, we can skip. Take a look. This is coming from the Associated Press. And it would appear that there is no music or anything to this. Interesting, the fact that this would be a hidden self-portrait, but Van Gogh is also known for painting, especially things like Starry Starry Night, or Starry Night. He's a very famous he's a very famous painter, very interesting individual in history. So very interesting, to say the least. There's also one coming from Reuters. So that is the image of the hidden, or that is the hidden image, a self-portrait of Van Gogh underneath this actual artwork, which is fascinating that he would do this. But he is an interesting individual. Demise FPS says, I wonder how much that painting would go for. Enough that we could do some serious work in Ukraine. It's no dogs playing poker. No, it's not, but that is also a fantastic painting. Now, I'm no art expert. I don't. I enjoy artwork. I can find it very beautiful, but I'm not big into, art and big artists and that kind of thing. I just not, or into a lot of different types of art, especially oil paintings. I know some really basic stuff like about Van Gogh, very famous painter. He cut off his own ear, that kind of thing. But I don't, aside from the stuff that pretty much everyone else knows, I don't know a whole lot about art. But I know that this is very valuable and very rare and very important of a find. But that's pretty cool. So that's kind of the interesting news. So we can kind of end off on a highlight for the day. But obviously today was, when it came to the international news, I know it seems like it's a little neglected, and I probably is to an extent, but what's happening in Ukraine really, that hit us immediately within the first 5-10 minutes of researching, and that really took a hit to our morale, to say the least. And I think that taking the extra time to talk about it in an important way, and talk about, why is something like this so important? Why is what's happening? What is the mentality how that could lead to this happening? Why is it a war crime? And it's not the only reasons. I'm sure the actual attorneys at the International Court of Law will actually find a lot more. But it's a lot of, it's a lot of important stuff to understand. And to see these images and to look at this stuff, I don't recommend you go and you try and do what we do, where we're going through all these, because what you're going to find is a lot of death and destruction and misery, and it's going to be pretty terrible of a time. At least we're kind of used to it. So we all have our own personal reasons why we're used to it to an extent, and we're kind of desensitized to it. But it's not something to look at. But the images from today, I think, are especially important to understand what war is like. I've talked about that a little bit before. This is what it's like from the point of view of a person, from somebody on the front line in a firefight. This is some small unit tactics. But it's, but what you have to understand is war is terrible. It is the most completely horrendous action, in and of itself. And at a bare bones, basic, ultimate level, war is imposing your will forcefully upon another group. And that is essentially the entire definition of war. And it's something that we've seen a lot of. We saw it in Mariupol. We saw it in Bucha and Hostomel and Irpin. But a lot of these we saw were adults. And unfortunately, children are affected by this very significantly. This is trauma that, if they survive, that will last their lifetime. This will be an entire generational problem for Ukraine. This will be, and a strike on some place like VINNYTSYA only shows that this is not a war of, stopping NATO expansion, or to overthrow Nazi regime, or to do anything that is a justification of what the Russians say it is. This is simply a war of killing an entire group of people, and that is ethnic cleansing and a genocide. And so with that, I leave you with that kind of information and that kind of thought process. I'm sorry today was a little bit probably heavy-hearted on a note, but you understand why at the very least. I appreciate you guys as a community. You're very intellectual and very thoughtful about this kind of stuff, and you guys actually keep pretty good conversations about everything on the channel and on the Discord, and I appreciate that too. It doesn't turn into just a bunch of people saying a bunch of crap, which is nice. And I hope we continue to foster that kind of a community as going forward. But thank you very much for seeing all of this, for joining us tonight. And I do hope that your family, and your friends remain safe. And if not, I hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. The reason we do this every night, as I have said a couple times now, is because we want to be a something for good. We don't want to we want to be the news that gives back. We want to give back to the very news stories we talk about every single night, and that only works with your efforts, with your community support. So please check out the video description. We're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never going to push merchandise on this channel. Everything that we do is for fundraising, to help people. And while we can't bring loved ones back, while we can't change how a war is fought, what we can do is we can provide those people who are caught up in between these two opposing forces and are suffering immensely because of it. We can give them blankets and shelter and clean drinking water, sanitation. We can give them food, electricity. And not just for Ukraine, but for millions of people throughout the world affected by climate change and crises, conflicts. We can do this for people all over the globe. So regardless of if they're suffering in Ukraine because of the war, or in Somalia or Ethiopia because of famine and drought, or if they're suffering because of floods ongoing in Afghanistan or India or Brazil, we are able to help. So you guys are awesome at being able to help us do that. If you can't give a lot to the organizations we have listed, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, let your friends know about us. Give us a like and subscribe. I know it sounds cheesy to say this. I think it sounds like a plug for ourselves. But the reason we say this is because the more people we reach, the more people we can ultimately help. And that is the goal of this. The more people that join, the more people can add to these. The more people that join at some point, the more subscribers and everything we have, the more people, we can start throwing on, fundraisers after a certain point. We can fundraise right here on the channel. We'll still have all these we'll still have everything in the video description. We'll still have all these links. We'll maintain them on the website, on the Discord. And be sure, if you have others that we don't have, especially for places we don't have yet, please send us the links in a short description. Go onto our Discord, get in contact with a staff member. We want to vet more. We want to get as many links and as many organizations as we can. And we want to try and get as many of these vetted and through the process. We have a bunch going through the process right now that's already been submitted by you guys. We want to get a ton more. And we want to help people globally, everywhere. So thank you once again for helping us support in this matter. And I can't thank you guys enough. I really can't. So while it is ending on a very heavy-hearted point, thank you guys for joining us tonight. I hope you will be back again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. And my name is Paul from the New News. And have a fantastic rest of your night. And have a fantastic Friday. And have a fantastic end to the rest of your week. And I hope that everything goes well. And I, too, as much as you, are looking forward to the weekend. But another time to join you here together right here on the channel. Have a great night, everyone.